Hi, I'm Randy Hollenbeck, and this is the Music Roundtable. Today on our show, we have Ty, the drummer from Smile Empty Soul.
How's it going, everyone?
Let's dig into some of your history, how you began playing drums, what inspired you to start.
All right. Well, I started playing drums when I was younger. I was about 9 years old, and I was in fifth grade, and our band teacher came to our school, or came to our classroom, I should say, and he was talking a bit about the band program. And as soon as he said, "You're gonna get to record a CD," I was like, "Ooh, that's cool. I want to do that." And I've always loved music ever since I was a young age. I've always been drawn to the sound of drums in particular. Like my mom would be listening to all the 90s classics when I was growing up and I was a kid at the time. And I just remember like just being really drawn to the rhythms and all that. Like I didn't really know, I couldn't explain it at the time, but that's just kind of how it was. But when I was a kid, I wanted to play the saxophone, and but the saxophone was a little too heavy for me. I was a scrawny little kid. I couldn't quite hold it. My microphone's tipping. Sorry about that. There we go. And then I wanted to try the trumpet. That was my second choice, but the trumpet you have to blow in a certain way, and I couldn't quite figure it out. So percussion was the third on my list, believe it or not. And I remember him showing me the pattern, and it just kind of came natural, and I played it right back, and so it was settled. That's what I was gonna do, was play percussion. And I had just the little snare and the set of bells for a couple years, and we just studied, doing the little band book and took drum lessons. And then I got a drum set when I was in middle school to practice for jazz band auditions. And I just kind of went from there. And my dad, growing up, he was like the world's biggest Rush fan. He has all the Rush albums, all the Rush DVDs. And yeah, so we ended up going to see Rush on their 30th anniversary tour back in 2004. I was 12 at the time. And I remember just being on the way there and just being really excited. It was my first concert ever. And I saw the late, great Neil Peart do his epic drum solo in the middle of the set. And at that moment, I was just kind of like, you know what? That's what I want to do. I want to do that. So that's just kind of how I got started.
So you were like pretty much influenced by like progressive music, like Rush with odd time signatures and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I'm always a big fan of that. Soundgarden's another one of my favorites. So they do a lot of like odd time in their songs, but they do it so effortlessly. They make it feel just as natural as 4/4, and that takes some raw talent. So I've always been influenced by stuff like that, but really just anything with a good groove. Led Zeppelin's another one of my favorites. I grew up on like Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots and just all kinds of that kind of stuff. As I got older, I started to get more into like jazz and blues and like soul music and like Motown and stuff like that. And of course, like the newer rock bands that come out. I draw influence from a little bit of everything, just whatever moves my soul in the moment. That's just kind of I take influence from all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And then when did you like get into your first band?
All right. So my next door neighbor was a guitar player, and he was really into like kind of the 80s rock and roll kind of thing. So, inevitably, like he moved in when I was about 13, 14 years old. And, inevitably, and we lived right next door. So he heard me jamming on the drums one day because, the drums are kind of loud. They leak out through the basement and you can hear them. So he's like, "Hey, dude, I heard you jamming. You're pretty good." And then, inevitably we ended up, having a jam session together. And he had a buddy that I played football with back in middle school. And his dad was actually our coach. And then the three of us started getting together and jamming. And it was the three of us for a while. We started a band called Schism, and we were just kind of doing like hard rock, really just whatever we felt like writing. It tended to err on the side of like hard rock, like kind of classic influenced rock, because that's what we were all into at the time. They had like their kind of 80s influence, and I was more progressive, heavy rock kind of stuff. We split the writing duties, and so it was kind of just a melting pot of different things. And we ended up kind of settling into a more like a glam metal type of sound, and changed our name to Down and Dirty and started doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, we had a good run. We were together from when I was like 15 to 17. We had our first show in Bass Player's Basement back in 2008. That was my first ever gig, and I just remember the singer we had at the time. He was reading the lyrics off of a music stand, and it was I had my little Neil Peart kit in the back, and it was one of those things like we thought we were ready. Every band has that moment they go through where they think they're ready for their first show, and then you find out, oh, there's a lot more that goes into putting on a good show than you think. So, but we packed the basement. Like our whole high school came out. Well, not the whole high school, but as many as we could fit in a basement. And it was a good show. It was a fun time, and we just kind of kept jamming from there. Started playing public shows. There's this venue by where I grew up in Morris, Illinois, called Sonic Portrait, and that was where I played my first show when I was 16. And we got a show, and there was this other band that I would actually end up joining years later called Synapsis, and they headlined that night, and we were the closing band after them. And we outsold them on tickets. And so the owner, Dennis, super cool dude. I still stay in touch with him to this day. He ended up having us back pretty much every month. And he also owned a recording studio in his basement as well. So he tracked our album that we ended up putting out in 2009. It was called Live Fast. And we just kept playing local gigs. My guitarist actually went down to Rocklahoma in 2008 and made some connections, met some people down there. And through his connections, we were actually able to land a slot, playing the campground at Rocklahoma in 2009. And we did the little pre-party at this place called the Backyard Bar in Tulsa. And there was this band that came from England called the Gypsy Pistoleros that headlined. And they were like the coolest dudes. Like, that was such a fun time. So, but at the time, like, I was kind of feeling like I wasn't, kind of into that kind of music anymore. Like, I wanted to experiment with different things. And, we were kind of, we all had different ideas, and we were all stubborn 16, 17-year-olds. So naturally, there was some clashing going on. So I decided after that to kind of start pursuing other projects. And I ended up joining another band called American Riot. They were a band that we played a couple of shows with at Sonic Portrait. And they were another band that was from... So I grew up in a town called Plainfield, Illinois, and I went to Plainfield South High School, and then these guys were from Plainfield North. So they were on the other side of town, but they were like, that school's like band that everybody knew. So I got in with those guys, after they parted ways with their drummer and bass player, and they took a break for a little bit. And they were more on the pop punk side of things, and that's kind of what everybody was doing at the time where I grew up. So it was definitely an opportunity to kind of try something different, jam with some different, more experienced people, and, just, kind of took it from there.
And so, how did you get offered the gig in Smile Empty Soul? How did that come about?
All right, so about 5 years ago, it's crazy to think it was that long ago already. But I was touring with this band from Chicago called Romantic Rebel, and we'd had a pretty good run up to that point. We played a couple of shows. We ended up tracking an EP. I'm really bummed this EP never really saw the light of day outside of our last tour that we sold it at the merch table. But we tracked an EP with Johnny K, who's one of my favorite producers of all time, and it turned out really well. Like, there's some great tracks that we came up with. But anyway, so we did a run with Smile Empty Soul back in 2016 when they were touring for their Shapeshifter album, which has re-recorded versions of Bottom of a Bottle, Silhouettes, and Nowhere Kids, the hits, and then 3 new songs that they came out with at the time. And they were touring in support of that at the time. and it was this big 2 month trek like all around the country. So we kicked off in, I believe it was St. Louis, Missouri was the first show, and we it went for about a month and a half. And long story short, everything with Romantic Rebel kind of went during that tour. So I ended up taking a train home from Nebraska, and then they played an acoustic show, and then kind of all went their separate ways after that. But about 2 years later, I'm jamming with another band called Another Lost Year, and we were touring constantly and playing some sweet shows. And then I get an Instagram message from Sean out of the blue one day. It's like, hey, dude, like, there's a possibility I might need a fill-in drummer down the road. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I was just like, yeah, of course it's something I'd be interested in. Like, I was just kind of blown away that, after all that time, like, I made that big of an impression that, he remembered me and, you know, thought that I was the guy to step in. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'll do it. So about almost 3 years ago now, I played my first show with Smile at the Mississippi Moon Bar in Dubuque, Iowa, and just right away it just felt good. Like there was like a whole new energy there, and I was like more excited than I'd ever been to get up on stage. And there were maybe like 10 people in the crowd at that show, but it was like still like it was like the time of my life. And it was one of those things where if that tour went well, then it was going to be a permanent thing. And so the tour went well, and I ended up sticking around. And then we kept touring and touring, and we've had a couple EPs since I've been in the band. My first EP with the band was Sheep. That was the end of 2019. And then we just did one that we released last September called 2020. And then we just put out this January Soft Songs for the Quarantine Mind, and that's a little bit more of a toned down EP. And then we have plans for some more new music down the road. I mean, I can't really like say an exact game plan, but we do have plans to record very, very soon. So,
Now, since we've been like in lockdown for this whole year, what have you been doing during that time?
I mean, just trying to stay sane, number one, and number two, just I've not really tried to let it slow me down. I mean, it's slowed down musically for sure, but like in life, I've tried not to let it slow me down. Like I've been working this whole time. Started off just working at this warehouse, and I just recently moved to Michigan about 10 months ago, and I've been working out here as a delivery driver and just trying to stay busy musically as much as I can when I'm not working. I've just been kind of writing my own tunes, and I have a jam spot that I've been just trying to film Instagram content and just stay out there any way that I can. Smile's been trying this whole time to keep on the road, and the timing just never worked out. Like every time we'd get close to going on the road, like everything was shut back down, and it was all out of our hands. I mean, if it was up to us, we never would have stopped. But luckily, this last tour was able to work out, back at the end of January, early February, just in Missouri and Texas, where they've started opening things back up and they haven't seen any issues. So we were able to make like a week and a half tiny little run work, and those were probably some of the best shows that we've played in a long time. You could just tell people were super hungry to get back out there and see the shows. Like all the bands that played, like we had this whole new energy. Like all the other bands, I mean, Tantric was out with us, and then there were some locals here and there at some of the other venues, and it was just like the first night when I was getting up on stage, like I thought I might cry because I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. It had been almost an entire year since I played a show at that point, and I was just like so ready for it, and it was great.
Yeah, it's like it was taken away from you for like a year and you were like hungry to get back out there and yeah. So those shows were there a lot of people came out or were like half capacity or what was that like?
Oh yeah, I mean there were some shows where like yeah there were capacity limitations in some form at every show, but there were some that you wouldn't know it because it was still like packed. And yeah, I mean like sold out to whatever limitation there was, but it still felt like a packed show. I mean like a lot of the shows we play, like they're not always like it's not like wall to wall packed every single night, but like it's still a decent crowd, and that's kind of how it felt. But even I felt more so because people missed it, and at this point people would do whatever they can to get to see a show. The people who wanted to go out and still see support their favorite bands and have that mental health release that I feel is necessary. Like it was fantastic.
Now, with all these states starting to open up, like in Texas and Florida and out west, are you guys like getting ready to start booking another tour or?
Yeah. Well, we've already got one lined up actually in the Midwest now. The end of April, early May, we're supposed to hit Iowa and Wisconsin, Illinois. My hometown of Joliet's on there at the Forge. We have a show at the Apollo in Belvedere, which is another really nice room. We have a show in Michigan and Indiana. Even in some of those states, like Illinois and Michigan in particular, are some of like the heaviest lockdown states. They've had kind of the tightest, most ridiculous rules this whole time, but there's a lot of venues that are still, having shows. Like a lot of the smaller venues have been having some kind of more low key, limited shows, and they've been great so far. I've been to a couple myself, and so I'm really hoping that this one sticks. And if things keep going the way they have been, I mean, cases have been plummeting for months now, so I'm hoping that things will keep going forward and not backwards. So, and then of course we have tours lined up actually for the rest of the year that we'll be announcing kind of as we go, because obviously anything can happen between now and then. But at some point, we're going to end up making our way out to Florida and like the East Coast and hopefully up north. I mean, I'm not sure like when up north will start looking good, but we're definitely going to be out there any way that we can.
Okay. Um, the next tour you're going on, is it like a package tour with other bands, or is it just like you guys headline?
So we're headlining, and we have another band out with us called Hearts and Hand Grenades. So it'll just be the two of us plus whatever locals are on each venue. Um, so it should be a fun one.
Cool. Now, what have you been currently listening to as far as music?
Oh man. Well, I've been revisiting a lot of the old classics. I mean, I've been, I have like a classic rock playlist on Spotify that I always default to when I have musical ADD and I can never like figure out what I want to listen to. So I always default to classic rock. I have a playlist of just all the songs I grew up listening to when I was a kid, and I have one with all the 90s classics. But I've also been really big. I've kind of had an obsession with just trying to find new sounds to listen to. So like I have a SoundCloud profile, I have a Mixcloud profile. I'm always on Bandcamp. I'm on just any like music site that I can find. Every Noise is one. Every Noise at Once is a really good one. It's kind of not super well known, but it breaks everything down by like super specific genres, and there's like a section where you can see all of Spotify's new releases for each week and break it down by like super specific genres. And so I've just always been trying to find new things to listen to. Like I said, I've been on kind of like a heavy soul and blues kick, and so that's always like something I go to. Really, just whatever I'm in the mood for. Like I listen to just about everything.
Okay. Um, any crazy tour stories?
Crazy tour stories. um, I'm trying to think of some good ones. There was one time. Um, oh man, I wasn't ready with the tour stories. Um, I know that when I was in Another Lost Year back in 2017, we played a show in St. Louis and we got robbed in broad daylight during sound check. So that was a wild one. We were sound checking. It was like 5:30 in the afternoon. We had our van parked out in the parking lot, and I'm getting the merch set up. All of a sudden, singer bursts in. He's like, "All our stuff just got stolen," and so I go out and like the cops had to come, and turned out somebody had picked the lock and forced their way in and taken a bunch of stuff from us while we were sound checking. So it's one of those you never think it'll happen to you until it does kind of things. So yeah, that was kind of wild.
What was the first song you ever learned how to play?
The first song I ever learned how to play. Um, hmm, trying to remember. Um, I want to say when I was 12 and I got my kit, I remember being really into 3 Days Grace at the time. I think Just Like You was the first song I like actually like taught myself how to play. The first song I remember being taught in drum lessons was Animate by Rush. It's one that's got kind of like a distinct ride pattern, but it's fairly simple compared to some of their other stuff. And that was the first song that I remember being taught how to play. But I would always just kind of jam along to the radio and just play along to whatever was playing. And I was really into like the rock scene, like 3 Days Grace and Trapped, and trying to think what other like Hoobastank was big back then. Like all the bands that were like big around that time. Like that's just kind of what I ended up jamming along to.
What about favorite song you like to play on drums?
Ooh. And so I would say probably Free Will by Rush is one that I always love playing. That one's always a fun time. It's a really intricate and crazy song to play. Um, sometimes I'll jam some Toto. Rosanna is a fun one, that little shuffle groove. Just really anything with a challenge. I'm always trying to push myself to, escape that comfort zone and get better, and just kind of just learn new techniques and tricks, and so yeah, there's a lot of fun songs that I love to play.
What? Yeah, like what's the worst job you've ever had?
The worst job I've ever had. Oh my gosh. So when I was 22, I think I was working in this warehouse. It was like a refrigerated warehouse. The name of the company was World Class Distribution, but they're like the main, at least where I live. They were like the main distributor for Trader Joe's. So we did all like the Trader Joe's stuff, and I worked in the refrigerated section. So it was like 38 degrees in there every day, and I had to load like pallets full of like just like veggies and fruits and stuff that needed to be kept refrigerated. And it was just awful. Like like the first week or so, like I started there when they had just opened, so the first week was like kind of like a test run. And I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. Like this is easy. It was short days, it seemed easy enough. And then we launched for real, and next thing I know, it's 14, 16-hour days. You don't get to go home till all the work's done. The supervisors we had were just awful. Like they were just constantly barking orders, and if you made even the smallest mistake, they'd sit there and just make you feel like the biggest idiot. And they just didn't care. It's like you got like 2 breaks, 3 breaks, or whatever, and then once that was done, it doesn't matter. Like you could be there for another 8 hours, you don't get another break till all the work's done. And I remember very vividly there was this one guy who came into work, and he was like really sick, and he was just not feeling well at all, and he actually ended up throwing up like right there in the garbage can in front of the supervisor, and the supervisor still made him stay. That was when I was just kind of like, you know what? No, I'm not putting up with this. I'm not going to be treated this way. Like that's not okay to me. I mean, no job is worth your health or your, sanity. Like it's not that's not what I'm about. I'm the type of guy that like I'd rather make a little bit less money but be happy and love doing what I do than take a super high paying job and just be miserable every day and then have like no energy to do the things I enjoy when I get off work cuz I'm just so like just done with everything.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? What you got anything coming up here pretty soon, or just a tour?
Yeah, so I mean, we have that tour in late April, early May, and I'm just hoping that that one sticks. And then, like I said, we've got plans to do some more recording down the road. Not quite sure. I mean, I think we're planning to do. I think this next one we're gonna do a full length. The plan's still kind of up in the air. I mean, I don't want to like give too much away, and I don't really know exactly like what the plan is myself. But I know that we are going to be doing some recording very soon, and I just hope that things keep going the way they're going, and I'm really happy to see it looks like more bands are starting to get out there and tour again, and I say more power to them. I'm in full support. I think it's time that bands do start getting up and getting back out there and showing people that it can be done, and there's no reason that it can't be. Like I've seen, I looked at the graphs myself, every single place that we played, the numbers keep going down. Like, us playing a show didn't cause a massive outbreak like everybody seems to be afraid of. And so I just hope people, see the reality of the situation and see that things are starting to get better. And, it's time for bands to get back out there and people to start taking their mental health back because that's important. And, it's, the mental health thing's doing a lot more damage than people realize, and it's time to start taking that seriously. So that's where I stand on all that.
Where could we contact you guys at? Like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter?
Yeah, we're on all those. Sean handles all the Smile Empty Soul social media himself, so he's always on there, replying to comments and liking comments and keeping people up to date on what's going on. I have my socials as well. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I have a personal profile and I have a artist profile as well that I'm always trying to keep up to date with content. I got kind of lazy with it over the past years with everything going on, but I'm kind of trying to get the momentum going again and start just kind of keeping things fresh and getting my studio back up and running, doing session work on the side, which is what I've always wanted to do. So I'm just hoping to keep things going.